Hi, my name's Nicole with Ride with Grace Motorcycles. So after taking suggestions from you guys on my Instagram page, I decided to make one of the first videos on here of a basic service. It's going to be, an example is going to be on this Lowrider S. So services, especially at the Harley dealer, are extremely overpriced. I'm not really sure why. They're super easy to do yourself, and I mean, depending on what your Harley dealer charges, they can go upwards of 300 bucks sometimes. So just a little bit of your own knowledge and time, you're really only going to be paying for fluids. Today, I'm just going to be showing the basic oil change, and I can go through all the other fluids in another video. But on this Lowrider S, so make sure you check your service manual. It will tell you whether your oil needs to be checked and changed on level ground, so the bike needs to be standing straight up on a stand, or if it can be on its side on a kickstand. The reasons for that are there are two different kinds of dipsticks. So the Lowrider S has a dipstick that's not fixed. So because this moves, you're able to get an accurate oil reading even with the bike on the kickstand. So this will move with your oil and check oil level even when the bike's not standing straight up. The Sportster that I have here, it has a fixed dipstick. So the Sportster has to be standing straight up on level ground to get an accurate reading on that. So really important, make sure you check your service manual. So the first thing you're going to want to do is, of course, pull your drain plug. For the Lowrider, because it's seated lower, I have the low profile oil pan that will fit underneath the bike nicely. So drain plug, I'll show you guys where that is. Alright, so you have your drain plug here for your oil pan. It's just on this bike, at least, it's right behind the kickstand. So for this, just make sure that when you pull that plug, you have your oil pan right next to you and ready to scoot over, so you're not going to make a mess all over the floor. I'm sure all of us have done that before. So yes, the Lowrider S has that dipstick that is not fixed, and so the oil can be checked when the bike is on its kickstand. It doesn't have to be standing straight up. When I pull the plug and I'm draining the oil, however, I do stand the bike straight up just to make sure I'm able to drain all of that old nasty oil out of the bike before I put new oil in. So drain plug's pulled, oil drained out already, that's when you move on to your oil filter. So I'll show you guys the oil filter and placement in a second. But with Harley oil filters, they do have a specialty oil filter wrench that you can buy from the Harley dealer. You don't have to have this though. You can just go and get a generic oil filter wrench. The oil filters are only supposed to be put on hand tight, but a lot of the time it creates a very tight seal just throughout it heating up and you riding. So most of the time, at least, I can't get it off with just my hand. I went and got the one from the Harley dealer just because it fits on really nicely and you don't really have to mess with it very much, but you can just get a generic one from any auto parts store around you. Your oil filter here, I'm going to go ahead and use the oil filter wrench from the Harley dealer. I'm just going to go ahead and fit it right on the front of the filter, and it shouldn't take too much force, but go ahead and just loosen that filter. Just get it to a point where you're able to loosen it the rest of the way with your hand. Then you can take that wrench off and you can just use your hand. All right, so now we have the oil filter off and the bike is still draining out just the remainder of that old oil. So installing the new filter, while we're waiting for that, when you get your new filter, make sure that you take just a little bit of the new oil and you're gonna rub it right around where this seal is. That way it's gonna create a good seal when you put it on there. So just rub a little bit around that seal. Make sure it's fully coated before you put it back on. When you put your oil filter back on, you do not need the oil filter wrench. It's supposed to be hand tight, so just go ahead and screw it back on nice and snug with your hand. Don't use the oil filter wrench. You don't need the oil filter wrench, just your hand. Make sure it's snug and just hand tight. So finish snugging that on there. All right, so once you have the new oil filter on and all of the old oil is drained out of the bike, you can go ahead and put that drain plug back in. Make sure that you have a new O-ring to replace your old one if it needs to be replaced. Check that every time. Make sure that you're not putting a drain plug back on your bike with a missing O-ring. All right, so last you're gonna put in your new oil. Always make sure that you check your service manual to make sure that you're putting in the right amount before you start putting it in. And again, make sure that you know what kind of dipstick you have so that you know whether you need to have your bike standing straight up or if it's okay to have it on the kickstand when you're putting the new oil in. I don't know if this will come in clearly, but on the dipstick, it'll show a fill line for when it's hot and when it's cold. So make sure that you're looking at the correct fill line. So it's cold, obviously, we're gonna be filling to this first line here. So when you're doing it, again, make sure you know the right amount to put in before you start doing it. And then make sure that you're always checking the level on here too. I mean, part of the way through. And then once you're finished, make sure you have the correct amount in there. So services seem very basic and easy. I know a lot of people will take their bike into a Harley dealership or into some other shop just to get it done, but you'll actually end up saving a ton of money if you do it yourself. If you just have a basic service manual and basic tools, it's super easy to do it yourself. Most of those fluids you can find either at a Harley dealer or you can buy them online. They're a lot cheaper online though. I usually grab them from Drag Specialties. I am not going to do the other fluid changes in this video. I wanted to briefly touch though on brake fluid for this service. I typically suggest changing it every year to year and a half. If you are worried about it having any condensation, you can check your top reservoir, which I'll show you on the Sportster since I already have that reservoir cover off. And you can tell if there's signs of moisture just by looking in that reservoir. The Sportster, which was supposed to be a project bike, has been sitting for a little while and it does have signs of moisture, so I'll show that to you guys so you know what you're looking for. To check your reservoir, you're just going to want to take that cap off. Like I said, I was doing this to the Sportster the other day, so I already had the cap off of it. It just has 2 screws that will hold it in. Under that cap is a rubber gasket that you're going to take off, but something really important to note before you do this: when you're doing anything that has to do with brake fluid, make sure that you cover all of your painted parts. With the Sportster, with it being a project bike, I was already repainting the tank, so I just went ahead and took the tank off when I started this. But brake fluid can really damage your paint, so it's better to be safe than sorry. I would cover all painted parts before you do anything that's going to be dealing with brake fluid near nice painted parts. So you'll take that rubber gasket off, and you'll look in the bottom of this reservoir. Make sure you have a really well lit space so you're able to see down in there. If there's any gunk, grime, or buildup on the bottom of this reservoir, you know that those are signs of moisture and you're going to want to change out that brake fluid. With the Sporty, there is gunk in the bottom of this, which I'll show you guys, so I am going to be doing that at some point when I get around to it. But let me show you guys what that looks like. So as you can see in the bottom of this, there's some gunk and like buildup all on the bottom of that. Very clear signs of moisture in there. So I will be making another video on changing out the brake fluid on the Sportster, and I'll be going through the rest of the service on the Lowrider S, going through cleaning out that air filter and other fluid changes. So stay tuned and check back in, and I should have those videos up shortly.